It's good to be together again. If we haven't yet met, my name is Joel, and it's a joy and a delight to just be together with everyone. Feel free to grab a drink, bring it to your seat. You know, I don't know if you do this, but we do this. Something we like to do as a family, which actually probably started off as a way to avert World War III. But like, when you go to a restaurant as a family, you always, we've got 4 children, and when you went out to eat, you kind of had to like try to find something that everybody liked. You know, and you know, a few of us are much more adventurous in our palates. We want to always go somewhere that we've never been before, to taste something. You know, I'm the kind of person, if something's on the menu that I've never had, that's what I'll have. Other people in our family want to always order the same exact thing, which kind of seems really weird to me, but you've had it 1,000 times. Why do you need it another time? The same thing or the same restaurant, you know? So then there's these things called food markets, right? Food markets are incredible. You know, whenever we go away, whenever we're in London, wherever we're just other places, we'll try to just go to a food market because everybody can just get their own thing. Last time we were down, we got some stuff. We got some Afghani food. We had some Mediterranean, sort of Greek food. Evan got some hot wings, which are actually really rubbish, so they weren't very nice, actually. Unfortunately, sometimes you get a dud. So we haven't been back to that particular place before. But we get a whole mix of stuff, you know, like you got Italian, you got pizza. And I don't know if you've gone to any of these food markets, if you like to go there. It's just so cool, you know. You can just go to the various food stalls and just get what you want. And it's like, what are you hungry for? You know, what do you fancy? Like right now, what do you fancy? You know, do you fancy Italian? Do you fancy Thai? Do you fancy Mexican? Do you fancy, there's the other place. I've seen this place. We haven't been, but the girls went to London last week. And they sent me a photo, and it's Himalayan dumplings. I'm like, I don't even know what those things are, but that's why I want them. I'm like, wow, that's like so cool. I didn't know that was a thing, right? I've had like dumplings from loads of different countries, never Himalayan ones. Like, what are it? Like, cool. That's why they sent me the photograph, because obviously they knew that would be the thing that I would want to go for. So like, whatever you're hungry for, whatever you desire, like that's what you pursue, you know. So whatever you fancy, you know, I could murder a pizza, so you go straight to the Italian place, or you really fancy a burger or whatever, you know. Whatever you're hungry for, kind of like, you know, drives your pursuits. And we've currently been doing a series called Come to the Table. And we've been looking at throughout Scripture, there's loads of times in the Scriptures where there's a meal that takes place, or a parable, or a story about a meal even. But the context of Jesus even talking about a meal, and the meal represents more than just eating something. It represents like community and just lavishness and generosity and grace and mercy. And it represents so much. We've been doing that series this month. If you've missed any of it, you can catch up online. And we're wrapping it up next week. David will be sharing next week. So I'm really excited about that. Looking at another little angle again, another little nuance about this context of a meal. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. But we're going to look at a story today, which, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, you've probably heard this story. Or at least you've heard someone say something about it. The phrase, feed the 5,000. It's probably something you might have heard. In fact, that story is recorded in all 4 of the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the Gospels. And it's recorded in all 4 of them. It's one of the, if not the, it's the only miracle it's actually recorded in all 4 books. So you might have heard that story before. And it's really sort of epic, crazy story, you know, feeding the 5,000. And you can read about it if you've got a Bible, or you can read about it in the John chapter 6. We're going to look at the one in the book of John chapter 6. If you don't have a Bible and you'd like one, we do have some Bibles, so please let us know. And before you leave, we can give you one to have, so you can take it away and you can learn and start reading for yourself. But anyway, John chapter 6. And we're just going to sort of look a whistle-stop tour at the beginning before we start digging into some stuff at the end. But just to paint some of the picture, paint some of the context, John chapter 6, and it's verse 5, and it says, Jesus looks up, and there's like a great crowd. It's described as a great crowd. It doesn't mean they were like the best-looking crowd. It doesn't mean they were like the most awesome crowd you've ever had. He means there's a lot of people. There is a great crowd. And he says to Philip, hey, where are we going to get enough bread to feed these people? You know, and it's like, oh my word. You know, isn't it nice how Jesus just asks these annoying questions? You know, it's like, hey, look, there's 1 million things. How are we going to get it done? It's like, what? what? There's so much that we've got to get done. There's so many people that need to be fed. How are we going to do it? And you're like, huh? Anyway, it's a cool story. He's looking at challenging their faith and stretching them. And Philip answers. He says to them, dude, man, it's going to take like half a year's salary alone for people just to have one bite. Okay, this is a big deal. Okay, there's a big amount of people. It's going to cost a big amount of money. It is too big for us to do anything about. And you might know this story. And anyway, there's a young lad. He ends up having like 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and they bring the packed lunch to Jesus. He blesses it, prays over it, and I don't know what happens, but somehow 5 loaves and 2 fish multiply. They just go, and they feed everybody, so much so that they can have leftovers, and everybody, it says that they actually had their fill. It says they were full. They were full. It wasn't just, here's a little bit. It wasn't just what Philip said, just enough for one bite. It was enough that they were full. And not only were they full, there was leftovers, 12 baskets of leftovers, it says. There was didn't Jesus know how to count? Why do a miracle and then overabundantly provide for it? Just because God's good that way. He's not stingy. He's lavish. He's generous. He doesn't cut corners. He's over and above and beyond even what's required. He gives you grace upon grace, mercy upon mercy. His mercies are new every single morning. We don't deserve it. And yet again, you have new mercy available for you today. His love is without end. We sometimes just don't feel like we even deserve it. And yet it doesn't stop because he's a lavish God who gives more than we need. And this story is huge and crazy, and it's just mind-blowing, and it's weird. And whether you believe it really happened or not, it's a crazy story. It's an amazing story. I believe it happened, by the way, but it's a crazy story. And then just whistle stop moving quickly on, they just saw Jesus do this thing. And they decide, what they decide to do? It says in verse 14, they're like, Jesus will be our king. Let's make him the king. You can read about it yourself. And Jesus is like, that's not what I'm here for. And it says he sort of has to hide away from this great crowd. It's like a massive game of hide and seek, isn't it? 5,000 men. So the only men were counted in that culture at that time. It says 5,000 men. But how do you hide from so many people? What did he? Anyway, that's another story for another day, right? Jesus hid because he knew it wasn't right for him to be made king by force, is what they wanted to do. They wanted to make him king. And then during the night, the disciples get in a boat and they cross to the other side of the lake, 3 or 4 miles away. And then Jesus does this thing where he's like, I'm not going to take the boat. And he walks on the water, right? This is one of the other walking on the water stories. And he walks on the water to get to the other side of the lake. I told you it was a crazy story, right? Little boys pack lunch, gets miraculously used by God, feeds thousands of people. Then Jesus walks on water and crosses over to the other side of the lake. And it's the next morning. And this is where we're going to sort of start to dig in a bit more. And it's in verse 24, verse 25 of John chapter 6. And the crowd wakes up, and they haven't forgotten that they try to find Jesus. And so it says they wake up, and it says when they realized that Jesus and his disciples were not there, they got in the boat. And they went across to Capernaum in search of Jesus. And finding him on the other side of the lake, they're like, wait, when did you get here? We've been looking for you, When did you get here? And Jesus can see what's going on in their hearts. He sees what the real question is, because he doesn't actually answer that question. I got here, I think it was about 1:30. My sundial watch was not working very well because it was the middle of the night. But if I had to hazard a guess, I probably got here between 1:30 and 2 o'clock last morning. No, he doesn't actually answer their question. He sees what's going on. He sees the question behind the question. He sees what's really going on in their hearts. And he says, I know that you're looking for me, not because you saw the signs that I performed. Because before Jesus fed them, he was healing people. It says he was teaching and performing miracles, not because of the signs that you saw, but because you ate the loaves and you had your fill. He says, don't strive for food. You've been wanting to strive to make me a king. You've been striving to find me. Don't strive for the things that spoil. Yeah? But for that which endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. See, Jesus realizes that there's a group of people, if we're going to identify them, sort of categorize them, this group of people that are following him are materialists. And when you live your life in pursuit of materialism, it means you're in pursuit of stuff. The thing that you're hungry for is stuff. The thing that you're after is the acquiring of more stuff. And Jesus is saying, I fed you with bread. And basically, you just want me now to feed you again. I fed you with bread, and that's what you're after. You're just after more stuff. You're just after more things. That's what you're really interested in. So people followed Jesus at that time because they wanted Jesus to do something for them. For example, they wanted Jesus to overthrow Rome. They wanted Jesus to get them back on top. They wanted them to not be, occupied people anymore. They wanted them to not have to, get rid of Rome so we don't have to pay the Roman taxes. Be the one that's going to deliver us. Be the one that's going to set us free from this tyranny and this opposition. And, they want Jesus to be this person that's making the king. They want him to do the stuff for them. They want him to just, sort it. They want him to overthrow the system. And Jesus is telling them, you're never going to satisfy your life if you always pursue stuff. Stuff spoils. Stuff spoils. It'll burn. One day it'll burn. You might have an amazing house. You might have an incredible car. You might have 2 holiday homes, one in Spain and one in, Canada. Let's just pick something. You can't take it with you. You can't. No matter how much you try, you can't. You go for it, spend your life trying to acquire and acquire and acquire. You don't have pockets big enough to take it with you when you go. And instead, you can spend your life hungry and pursuing stuff. And Jesus is saying, stuff will never satisfy. Stuff spoils. It's never going to satisfy your deepest hunger. And here in the West, we have to battle this all the time, don't we? My son had to get a new phone yesterday. He had the hand-me-down, but the hand-me-down, that the hand-me-down, that the hand-me-down of the parents had and the 4 siblings. And finally it broke because the wind-up thing on the side, didn't work anymore. So, his camera didn't work, hasn't been working for years. We were basically he was using it so we could get in touch with him, but he needed a new phone, and he finally got a new phone. Now, I know technology does this, but we live in an age where your phone is old the moment you get it out of the box. A year later, you have to buy a new one. A year later, you got to upgrade it. Your TV, you had that TV, but now there's a better TV. And it's fancier, and the colors are better, and it's sharper. And look, you can actually see their sweat pores, Look, you can see their ear hair, It's so much detail, and it's like we have to upgrade all the time. And our clothes aren't good enough because fashion changes, and the seasons change. We just live in a world where businesses run off of making us feel so discontented. We need more and more stuff. And so, especially in the West, we have to challenge this idea that we don't live life in pursuit of stuff. Because we can be conned and think that will provide happiness and satisfaction and enjoyment, but it won't. It won't satisfy the deepest hungers in our life. We have this promise, 100% satisfaction or your money back. And then so we got to change and upgrade. You change and upgrade. You're not happy with your body, fix it. If you're not happy with your marriage, get rid of it. If you're not happy with your sex life, find a therapist. If you're not happy with, we live in this world where everything has got to be changed and chopped and upgraded, and it has to 100% satisfy 100% of the time. And life doesn't always work that way, does it? And that's a hunger for stuff. And if we live life in pursuit of stuff, we will always be dissatisfied. And I guess that's the question. Jesus is saying, what are you really hungry for? What are you really, really hungry for? And then there's this next group of people. So there's, they start asking these questions. And the next kind of question that gets asked, if we're going to categorize them as materialists, let's call them legalists. And they're looking for the rules. And then here's what they say to Jesus, verse 28 of chapter 6. It says, what must we do to do the work God requires? What must we do to do the work that God requires? Some of us probably think that's a good question. Maybe we're sort of thinking, yeah, that's a better. The first one was like, when did you get here? Okay, it's a dud question. Yeah. Stupid boy, why'd you ask that question? I've got a better one. What must we do to do the work that God requires? It sounds really spiritual, doesn't it? It sounds like much more, I don't know, it just sounds like, it sounds a lot better. I think I like that question. Okay, let's be honest. Okay, I like that one. And it's kind of like, what must we do? What must we do? And Jesus answered, the work is this: believe. Believe in the one that he has sent. Okay, here's what he's saying. You don't have to do anything. It's not about your doing. It's about your trusting. It's not about your doing. It's about your trusting. It's about your believing in me. It's not your doing like performing. It's your trusting. You have to be hungry for me. This is what he's saying. You have to be hungry for me. And we can do this, even as followers of Jesus, we can do this without even realizing. We can sometimes fall into a pattern where we think that if we just get it right, then God will love us more, or it'll work out for us better. If we, sometimes life does work out better, okay? Boy, obey the speed limit, it's going to work out better for you, okay? Okay? But when it comes to how Jesus feels about you, how God treats you, you don't pass a test. You're not being given a pop quiz every time. The entry bar is this: trust in me and believe in me. It's not perform for me. It's not like, you do a bunch of things the right way at the right time always, and then you'll know that I'm with you, and then you'll know that I favor you. And maybe you've grown up in an environment like this, or maybe a church system, or maybe a religious system, because this is how religion works. Religion makes you feel like the better you perform, then better you earn the favor of your God. That's all religion in the world. The better you do something, the more your God will favor you, treat you, bless you in this life, or bless you in the afterlife. That's how all religion works. If you do certain sacrifices, they'll do things for you. If you do this thing this way and this time, then they'll do that for you. That's how all religion works. Christianity does not work that way. Whether you do it right or do it wrong, it doesn't change what Jesus has done for you. And the fact that you got it wrong didn't change the fact that he did it for you anyway, which was he sent his son to die on the cross and come back to life so we would know there's another way to live life. And we don't have to live life trying to perform in a way to earn favor. We don't have to perform, and we don't have to pay a price because he's paid the price. So we're not here to sort of do the rules and manage it by the rules, because we're like, tell me how to do it. Just tell me how to do it right. Tell me how to get it right. And what happens is that becomes behavior. How we behave becomes the measuring stick. And it's the measuring stick that you either beat yourself up with or we beat one another up with. And because they didn't do the right thing, or we didn't do the right thing. And Jesus does not function with a measuring stick. The measuring stick is Jesus. Jesus loves us unconditionally because Jesus paid the conditions to earn that love. God loves us unconditionally because Jesus paid the conditions for us to earn that love. We junked up in life. We messed up. The gospel tells us that humanity is broken, and it's this poison called sin. And because of that sin, we can't do anything about it, but because of this unconditional love, the conditions of the sin have been paid. So we are loved unconditionally. Not because there never was a condition, but because the condition was paid. Does that make sense? And so therefore, what do we do? You don't have to do anything. You have to believe. You have to trust. It's not about performing, it's about trusting. It's not about doing, it's about believing. And so Jesus is sort of rattling the cages of this group of people. And G.K. Chesterton says this quote. He says, "Let your religion be less of a theory and more of a love affair." Because let's be honest, if you've been around church for a while, you can kind of get used to the motions. It's just like if you've been married for a while, or or even friendship with people, you just kind of like, I don't know, you kind of get used to it, don't you? Maybe it gets a bit stale, or it gets a bit, I don't know, routine, same old. You know, which was once exciting is not as exciting. But this quote reminds us that as followers of Jesus, and this is going to sound really waffly, and I'm sorry, it's going to sound so fluffy and waffly, but I don't know how else to say it. As followers of Jesus, we need to fall in love with Jesus every day, more and more. And I'm sorry that's so waffly, and I'm sorry that's a little bit fluffy, but the thing is, if this ultimately is a relationship, then we need to find ways to discover ways that we can just grow in our friendship and our relationship with Jesus. It needs to be less of a theory and more of a love affair. And so a second group of people, you know, Jesus is sort of essentially saying to them, what are you hungry for? Rules? Is it just the rules? And this story carries on, and then there's a kind of like another group, if you like, another sort of question that comes out in this group. And this is in verse 30, and they say, what sign? What sign will you give us so that we may see and believe in you? What will you do? And funny how the questions go from like, hey, how did you get here? To what must I do? Now it's like, oh yeah, what are you going to do? It's like, can you see the journey of these questions, the narrative of how they like sort of move, if you like, you know, it's like, what's going on, you know, which is confusing because, wait a minute, like less than 24 hours earlier, you were hearing me teach, miracles were being performed, people were being healed. It was the end of the day, you were hungry and I fed you. Like, I'd be sitting there thinking like, hello? Like, was that not enough? Like, man, okay, let me do my other party trick. I walked on, oh, you were asleep, you didn't see it. Hey, like, it's like, man, I've been healing people, you've been hearing me teach, I fed the 5,000, I walked on water. Like, okay, I got a rabbit I can pull out of my hat, you know, like, it's like, what more do you want me to do, right? This stuff is like, was this stuff not enough? It's a funny question considering everything that's been going on. What will you do? You know, and this group of people, the heart behind this question, the hunger behind this question is people who are hungry for signs. So call them sensationalists. You got materialists after stuff, legalists who think it's all about the rules, sensationalists who just want the signs. And the sign that you had the day before is no longer good enough. You just want something else. You want something new. You want something else. You know, and sometimes maybe we do this as well. You know, God was faithful in the past, and he was trustworthy in the past. But then it's like, prove yourself again. Prove yourself again. You know, and somehow we get this discontentment that grows in our hearts because he didn't do the thing today that he did last week, or he didn't do the thing today this year that he did years ago. He's not changed. You know, somehow if we fall out of relationship because we think he's not performing the way we think he should perform, you know, come on, God, what are you going to do? What sign will you do for me? What will you do? What will you do? So it's kind of a crazy question. And then they bring up something from their past. So contextually, that they bring up something about this guy called Moses. And Moses was like, he's one of their heroes. Remember Moses? You might have seen some of the films. He was the one who was used by God to set everybody free. The Jewish people, they were slaves in Egypt. The Israelites were slaves in Egypt. And then Moses was used by God to like set them free and lead them out into the promised land. And this is like, I mean, Moses is like one of their great heroes. And in verse 31, they say this, our ancestors ate manna in the desert, in the wilderness. And it's recorded that he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Isn't it kind of, I mean, is it just so weird that they're bringing this up? They just had bread themselves the day before, didn't they? I'm like, what are you going to do? This is what Moses did. Moses helped feed us when we were in the wilderness. The manna came from heaven. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And it's like Jesus is sort of thinking, saying, look, but I've already told you that bread's not enough. Don't pursue that which spoils. Don't strive for that which spoils, but for that which is eternal. He said that at the beginning. And if you read the story about the manna didn't last. You couldn't put it in a Tupperware. You couldn't put it in a little dish and like stick it in the fridge or whatever. It spoiled. The next day it spoiled. Okay, it didn't last. It was only on the Sabbath when you had it, and it lasted for one extra day on the Sabbath. But every single day they had to go out and get more manna every single morning. That's the way they had to do it. It didn't last. If they kept it, it spoiled. It went wrong. It was not eternal. It does not last. And Jesus is saying to them, like, I just told you a second ago, don't go after the stuff that doesn't last. Don't go after the stuff that spoils. And you're asking for things that are just temporary. And he says this, it's not Moses, this is verse 32. He says, it's not Moses that gave you bread from heaven, but my Father. And he gives the true bread from heaven. The bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And Jesus is like, okay, I said a moment ago that he is just generous and lavish and expansive. You see, Moses was there, and Moses was helping the Israelites be set free from Egypt, and it was one people group in one location being fed every day. And then they're like, what are you going to do? And Jesus is like, man, I've got something that lasts, something that's eternal. And it's not just for one people group in one place. It's for the whole world. Because what I've got for you is so much bigger than you can ever imagine. You thought this was a big crowd that got fed? This is nothing. This is a drop in the ocean. I've got an entire world that I'm about to feed. I have a world. You see, they're asking these questions, and you can just see Jesus is pushing some of their understanding. It's like he wants them to see differently, to understand differently. It's for the world. It's like, so what are you hungry for? You're chasing signs? And it's kind of like he's been journeying with this group. You know, they've been listening to him teach. They've been seeing the things that he's done. They've been watching what's been going on. They've seen him heal. They had this miraculous meal. You know, he's just been like answering some questions. They're pursuing him. They're chasing him. They followed him across a lake. You know, and it's like he's journeying with them. And what he's doing is he's challenging them. He challenges them, and he's like, what are you hungry for? Is it stuff? Is it rules? Is it the signs? And then he makes this incredible statement. John 6, verse 35. I am the bread of life. I don't know how much more clear to make it. Okay, you've asked for these things, and I'm telling you it's this, and I'm telling you my Father in heaven is going to give it, and he's going to give you some bread, and he says, I am the bread of life. I am the bread of, how many words is that? I am the bread of, 6 words. That's such a clear statement, isn't it? I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Some people might say to you, or maybe colleagues, maybe people in college, university, maybe people said, well, God never really claimed to be God. And in the book of John, this is the book we're reading from, John writes about the times God claims to be divine. John's angle he looks at is about John being divine. We've just finished a study on the book of Luke, haven't we? We just looked at the book of Luke 6 weeks, and Luke was different. Luke did a report of what Jesus said and did. But John doesn't write about what Jesus said and did. John writes about who Jesus is. And John records who Jesus is, and it focuses on his divinity. And Jesus claims to be God. I am the bread of life. 7 statements. I am. And so Jesus is explicitly saying, I am. I am. And again, he links back to the context for the culture. You might know this. I'm sorry if you already know this. If you don't know this, brilliant. But if you already know this, then you could just be like, just nod your head and pretend to say, oh, yeah, this is interesting, but you already know it. So when he says I am, he's going back to this story of Moses again. Because they brought up Moses. He didn't bring up Moses. They brought up Moses. Feed us, man in the wilderness. Feed us, feed us. And what happened was when Moses is there, Moses himself is in the wilderness, and he has this encounter. This bush burns, it's on fire, but it's not being consumed, right? And Moses is like, whoa, what's going on? And he has this encounter with God. And that's where God says to him, Moses, I've chosen you to set my people free. You're going to go back to Pharaoh. You're going to set my people free. You're going to be my spokesperson. And Moses is like, yeah, but who in the world am I going to say has sent me? How am I going to say, who do I tell them is the person that sent me? Because Egypt had lots and lots of gods. It had lots and lots of different deities. There was a god of this, a god of that, god of this, god of that. And there's so much going on. And he's like, yeah, but what do I say? Suppose I go back to the Israelites, and it's in Exodus 3. And he says, suppose I go back and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they say, well, what should I say? What's his name? What should I tell them? And then God says to Moses in verse 14, he says, God says to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are saying to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. And here we have another group of people in a wilderness being told once again, I am. Jesus is explicitly stating, I am. By saying that, he's saying, I am God. What it means in the Hebrew there is I am uncreated, I am eternal, I am pre-existent. I was before, I was then in the past, I'm in the present, I am now in the future. I am, I pre-exist. It's a loaded word. It's not just some sort of weird greeting. I am who I am. It's not Star Wars-y thing. This is this explicit claim that Jesus is God. And not only is Jesus explicitly telling them that he is God come to earth, that he is the bread of life being sent from heaven, he is challenging them about everything they have lived their life for. He's challenging them because they've lived their life chasing stuff, they've lived their life trying to perform according to the rules, and they've lived their life just running after signs. And he's challenging every single aspect of what's going on in humanity, and maybe for us as well. Those are the same big things that drive all of us, aren't they? And not only is he claiming to be God, he's also talking about something that's going to satisfy a hunger that they've not been able to satisfy before. Because he says, whoever comes to me will never be thirsty again. Whoever comes to me will not be hungry again. You're not going to be dissatisfied with all the stuff you've been trying to pursue up till now. You're going to have a new kind of satisfaction. And of course, he's not talking about physical hunger. Because, you ate a couple days ago, and you're going to need to eat again. That's the way our bodies work. He's not talking about physical hunger. He's talking about something much deeper, isn't he? He's talking about something deeper going on. And he's talking about the hunger in their souls. He's talking about that hunger, that ache, that hole that we try to fill with so much other stuff. And it was so challenging. What he's talking about is not a nice story, because they actually were all pretty much offended and upset at what Jesus said. And you just have to get to the end of John chapter 6. And effectively, by the time you get to the end of the chapter, everybody's left him. John chapter 6, verse 1 talks about huge crowds, great multitudes that can't get enough of this guy. They're following him, they're chasing him, they're pursuing him. By the end of the chapter, everybody's left him, and Jesus looks to his own disciples, the 12, and he says, the 12 remain. The last 12 are here. Out of thousands and thousands, whittled down to just a handful. He says, are you going to leave me as well? See, it's so challenging that everybody leaves. Everybody leaves him. They don't like what he's telling them. They don't like the idea that he's actually God, or they don't like the idea that they're being challenged to not pursue life chasing stuff and rules and signs. They don't like that. Jesus is saying those things will never satisfy you. I am enough. I am enough. I am enough. I am enough in the midst of your heartache. I am enough in the midst of your challenging circumstances. I am enough in the fire. Even if the fire kills you, I am enough. I am enough. You don't have to perform for me. I am enough. I don't have to perform for you. I am enough. I don't know what you're facing in life. This is what Jesus is promising us. Whatever you've got going on in life, He is enough. He is enough. Whatever road you're on, whether it's smooth or rocky, He's enough. Whatever trauma you're experiencing, or whatever joy and delight you're experiencing, He is enough. Because He is the I am who pre-exists, the I am who is there in the past, He's there in your present, and He's got you in the future. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you're experiencing, the I am is enough. You don't need another sign. You don't need another performance. And you don't need to keep the rules just to get His attention. He is enough already. The I am says, I am enough. And if you're hungry for me, you'll never thirst again. If you're hungry for me, I can satisfy the deepest ache in your heart and the deepest ache in your soul, and you will be satisfied because I am enough. And it's a challenging message because we have to set aside all the other things. I'm going to ask the worship team to come forward. We're going to close with a song of worship. And Jesus makes this incredible claim. He says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. That's such a bold claim, isn't it? I am the bread of life is a crazy, bold claim. But it's such a generous offer. It's so generous. Whoever comes, whoever believes. It's so generous. Whoever. And then it's got this incredible challenge. We have to come and we have to believe. That one verse has got such a bold claim, a generous offer, and a personal challenge. So as we move into a time of worship, the question for all of us is, what are we really hungry for? You guys can start playing, it's cool. What are we really hungry for? Is He enough? Is Jesus enough? Whatever I've got going on in my life, is He enough? Has He done enough already? Is He enough? While we're doing this worship song, please come forward. There's a table for all. Got some Ribena there and some bread. There's gluten-free bread at the bowl at the back. But when Jesus came to explain who He was, He didn't give us a theory, He gave us a meal. And this simple juice and bread is just to remind us who Jesus is and what He's done. And just during this worship song, I want you to take a moment and just come forward whenever you feel ready and trust the one who is enough in your life, the I am who is enough. And maybe today you can decide, you know what, I'm going to stop chasing stuff. I'm going to stop trying to get it all right by the rules and behavior. And I'm going to stop just running after signs. Jesus, you are enough. Here in the room, God, or with us online, God, that you would be all that we want. God, that you would satisfy our deepest desires. Thank you for your generous and lavish gift. Thank you for the abundance and the nourishment that you give us. Thank you so much. And Father, help us to be those who share it with others. Because your heart was for the world. Your heart was for so much more. Your heart is so big. Thank you for the gift you've given us. And help us to give it to others. I just pray for everyone here, whatever they got going on this week, whatever they're facing, whatever they're experiencing, they will be reminded that you are enough, that you've got them, you're with them, you'll never let them go. You are the I am, and you are enough. In your wonderful name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much for being here this morning. If you have any questions about what we've talked about, if there's anything we can do, we'd love to chat to you. If you want to know more about the church or more about what it means to be a follower of Jesus, we'd totally love to talk to you about that some more. And for those of you who've got little ones across the street, please remember to go and collect them. I know we're a little bit later than usual, so yeah, go collect your kiddos. There's plenty of tea, plenty of coffee, hang out, spend some time. If you need to go, be blessed. Enjoy your day, and see you again next week. Thank you.